Had a couple starts and stops on that last one. Just trying to test out some of my audio equipment. I've been picking up a lot of background noise, which I usually don't pick up. So did a couple quick tests to see if I could fix it. And I think hopefully this will be better, and I fixed it. So, okay, I don't think I'm going to be on that long today, but I did want to come on and explore a couple topics. And I will take questions at the end, or toward my end, so somewhere in the middle. I'll take questions if anyone has them. I am going more toward a straight Q&A on my YouTube channel, which will be once a month. I don't know when the first one's going to be for 2024. Probably toward the end of the month, because I've got a couple things to do over the next couple weekends. So it'll probably be toward the end of the month. I wouldn't mind trying to get around the 122 gateway a little bit to see, but we'll see. I'm not sure if when that's gonna happen, so I don't want to promise a time when I'm not sure it's gonna happen. I will go ahead and announce that maybe a day or so ahead of time on YouTube though. So 2024 is going to be pivotal for pretty much all of us in different ways. Depending on where you are in your process is going to determine how it hits you. You know, how hard it hits you, how intense it is. When we first start coming through, you'll see, if you get into energy reports, you get into a lot of people predicting the year, what's going to be going on with people. A lot of us can kind of get bogged down on if they say, oh, there's a lot of stuff coming for humanity this year. I know I've said it on this channel that it's going to be a pivotal year for humanity. Closing out, it's like the fourth year of our since COVID, the COVID realities ushered in a whole new kind of era for humanity, and now we're kind of going into the fourth year of that. So if you look at that kind of being a starting point, and now we're in the fourth year of that. So depending on where you are in your journey, if you're still really hooked into the human consciousness realities, it's going to feel a lot tougher than if you're not attached up to those realities. I'm not saying it won't still feel tough, because a lot of times we think, you know, and tough from our human's perspective. A lot of times we think if we are in our ascension process that we are completely detached from our human realities, and in some ways that is true and then not true. It's true in the sense we're detached, but until the collectives go through a certain clearing, we are still technically having in our body to clear. That's why it's so important for the collectives to clear something, because then you can continue that part of your process. But when you're kind of in the middle of that, you can't clear, but you can only go but so far before the collectives start to clear. So even if you're far in your ascension, you're not really in your process, and you're not so much attached up to human beliefs, human realities, plugged into those human systems, you still might have a very big clearing year, because the collectives that are clearing certain programming, it's still linked up in your body somewhere. So it can get kind of tricky when it's never going to be a one answer for one person, or one answer for multiple people. So when you see a lot of the injury reports, you see a lot of the things about what's coming, you know, this year and how people are going to handle it. Some people will have a breezy, easy year, because that's just where they are in their process. Some people will just be coming into the fifth dimension and feeling all, you know, really into the energy of just feeling what the fifth dimensional energies feel like, and they're not really having boots on the ground, having to really do anything yet. They haven't gotten to a lot of their heavy duty clearing yet. They could have a completely blissful year. Some people who are on the other side of a lot of that clearing could have a blissful year, where if someone that's kind of in the middle of that and still hanging on to some human realities might not have such a year like that. So, and they could be technically along in their process, and someone just coming in the fifth dimension, someone in the ninth dimension can have a tougher year than someone in the fifth dimension. And you would think that would be reversed, but it really does depend on body density, where you are in your process, how much you're holding on to things, is how your year is going to go. And I always say how the year is going to go, and we do kind of map it as linear years, but if you go back through a lot of the videos I've been posting really since the summer solstice in the, you know, northern hemisphere, we've started our 2024 back then. You know, so it's not a linear year where it starts on the 1st and ends on the 31st of December. You'll see this stuff is going on way before the year hits. By the time the year hits, and by the time you get to, you know, January 1st, especially by the time you get to January 11th, you're really anchoring in that year. You already kind of have your marching orders on what you're supposed to do. Sometimes you might have been doing stuff around the 11/11 and trying to start anchoring stuff in, but it might have been kind of soft trying things out. If you were looking to finish a book this year, or looking to start a YouTube channel, or whatever, start on the speaking circuit, going into acting, starting a different job search, starting a different career. It doesn't really matter what it is. Everyone's going to have a different part to play in Ascension. Not everyone has the exact same roles to play, which is another thing that can get a lot of us kind of bent out of shape. We'll see some people out there doing all this stuff, and we feel like we don't have a part to play because we're not where they are, or we don't have the notoriety they have, or we don't have the audience they have, or whatever it is. When you start looking at Ascension and looking at what's your purpose, because that's one question I'll get is, how do I know what I'm supposed to do? What is my higher purpose? I don't know what it's supposed to be. But we really don't get our higher purpose until we really attune into everyday purposes. Just being kind to someone could be our purpose for that day. Anchoring in light for the first 2 or 3 years in Ascension, in our awakening and in our Ascension, those are pivotal things where you might sleep a lot. You might not do that much. You might just be really tapping into the dream world in those years and starting to understand how your dream world works and how it communicates with you and how you can communicate with it, in a sense, how you can call in realities. All those things, we look at them, and we always want to look at things in the beginning. We want to look at it kind of how our human looks at something. Is that successful? Did that provide more money, more time? Did it provide notoriety? Did it provide fame? That's how we kind of measure realities. Did I get a product out of it? Did I get a car out of it? What did I get? What did I amass that year? And when you go back and look back on your years, when you're in your human consciousness, it's all about, what did I get that year? Did I get a new job? Did I get a new boyfriend? Did I get a new girlfriend? Did I get a new car? Did I buy a house? Did I go to college? Did I graduate from high school? What was the physical marker of that year? And when you go back to your human consciousness and your human realities, and that just means your realities that were built on that consciousness was what was commanding your choices on how you viewed the reality, how you interpreted the reality, how you played in the reality. And technically we were unconscious in the reality, because your human consciousness is unconscious in these realities, because we don't understand we're creating them. We still think that we still have this impression that, we're not doing that, when we are very strongly doing that. So we go through so many iterations of what it is to have these realities and what it is to create these realities. And in our human consciousness, you're always going to, when you go through your year, I will guarantee you, you're looking at what were the big physical things that happened this year. And when you get more into your soul aligned realities, you start looking more of it energetically. What were the big energetic markers of the year? When was the bigger clearings that year? What was my biggest realization that year? When was my biggest, what did I shed? What did I have? What realities did I really say goodbye to? What realities no longer bounded me to a certain reality? And that's how you start to really shift how you're evaluating how things are going. Because in the beginning, we try to evaluate based on human criteria. And when we're doing that, we always fall short, because our soul-aligned realities are not based on human-aligned realities, so they don't have the same outcome. But even in our human realities, we never love the outcomes, even if it was the outcome we wanted. Even if it made us happy in that moment, it released happiness. It got us to achieve that frequency of happiness. Even if we got there, it didn't last long, because your human body's frequency is so low, it can't hold happiness. It can't live from that. It's just that frequency of happiness is in the 500 hertz, and I don't even remember what it is. But if you go and look at different emotional scales, you'll see where everything ranks. And, whether it's exactly on the mark, or if it's, who knows how close exactly it is when you start trying to measure something linearly. But when you look at our human body that has a frequency of in the 300s, and something of happiness and peace and joy, and, happiness is in the 500s, and you get to peace and joy, and they're even higher than that. You can't hold it. You know, you can only touch it and then move on, but if you never experience happiness, you never get to activate the frequency. You don't even know what you're striving for, you know. So a question that I heard posed and something I was listening to was, you know, do you feel free inside? And that's probably a better gauge of how you're doing in ascension than how much have I made, what have I gotten. Let me look at all my physical stuff and it's kind of like that scene in I think it was one of the Thor movies when the guy was like, look at all my stuff, you know, here's all my stuff I got over here. And, you know, he's trying to impress the women, and the ladies are like, woo, look at all your stuff. So cool, you got all this stuff. And he even kind of lumped it in just saying it's just stuff. I don't even really know what it is. It's just all this stuff I got, you know. And as humans, that's what we would do, is look at all my stuff, you know, look at everything I've accumulated. And other humans will evaluate our success on how much stuff we have. So when you start shifting that to, do I feel free inside? Because what you're going to find is a lot of that stuff starts to tie you down. It weighs you down. You feel so obligated to keep up with getting and amassing all this stuff that you're not free inside anymore. You don't have a free, there's no feeling of freedom inside. It's just a feeling of continuously going through the motions to try to get the same thing. It's, oh God, I can't remember. It's an economic term. It's kind of, you keep doing the same thing, but your gains are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. No matter how much you start going up after a while. I can't remember. I cannot remember what it's called. And it's been so long, but you start to not feel as good about the stuff you've gotten. And even though you're getting more stuff. And in our human existence, you know, we thought the stuff we got early on meant more than the stuff we got later on. You know, when your first love, you know, that was something will kind of always have a different place in your heart than the last love you had. You know, it just does. And because it was the first time experiencing those emotions, it was the first time kind of going through that when you first graduated from high school, when you know, that was the first pinnacle, when you turned 21, when you first went to college, when you know, first had sex, all that stuff, it kind of gets lumped into, because it's the first time we did that stuff, no matter how many times we continue to do the same stuff over and over and over again, it has diminishing returns. That's what I was looking for. It's diminishing returns. It's not the same anymore. It doesn't have the same punch anymore. You can have been super excited about the first house you bought, and you could have scaled up to an $8 million mansion on the last house you bought, but it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't bring you the same joy that the first couple things you did, because there was an achievement there. And once you've achieved that thing one time, continually upgrading and achieving the same thing, just you're kind of just, it's almost like in the game Monopoly. You're just kind of building hotels on the same property, and the property's kind of nice, whatever, and we just kept building the same stuff, and now I make more money, but I'm still just building on the same piece of land, and it's just not the same anymore. That's why you see so many people start to pivot and there's a reason there is something called a midlife crisis. Because so many people have kind of you know, all of our ascension process, our awakening process is encoded in our DNA. When it's our time to do it, we're going to do it. And there's a lot of collectives that have it coded at the same time. You know, they start going through this mass evaluation of their life around the age of 40. They start looking at their life, you know, leaving their partners, leaving their jobs, trying to figure out, why isn't none of this stuff make me happy? Let me just try to buy more of it. You know, let me get that sports car. Let me get that facelift. Let me get whatever. Let me get that tattoo, whatever it is I want, because I want to feel free. I want to feel like I used to feel. But you can't feel like that anymore. And it's a very fleeting feeling, and it can be a very, the word demonetizing, but that's not even really the word that kind of makes sense here, but in a way it is. It doesn't feel, it's not, this juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore. You know, it's not worth it. It doesn't feel worth it. It just doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere. And that's when you start to transition over into why am I not feeling happy anymore, even though I have way more stuff than I used to have? And that's when, I remember talking to a couple of clients I had, and one of the first things they would say is that money made them happy, and I'd always kind of try to pivot that. It's like, money doesn't make anybody happy. It never made anybody happy in the history of human consciousness. Money has never made anybody happy. It makes it easier. It makes things not as something else you don't have to worry about or think about. When you're going through certain parts of your process, it's something that you can take out of the equation. But it's not a source of happiness. It's a source of security for a lot of people. But it's not a source of happiness. And I think we've been shown that time and time and time and time again. Notoriety, fame, it's not a source of happiness. It's just a source of security. So, but a lot of that stuff starts to weigh us down. Having the security of fame, having to keep that up, having to keep that grind up, having to keep up a certain amount of money to afford the lifestyle you have. And even if you get so you can't afford it anymore, then you just start, credit cards and all the other stuff to keep it going as long as you can, because we get so bound to these things and they keep us weighed down. All these things tie us to a reality that is very ingrained in our human consciousness and very ingrained in our human programming, and it is not soul aligned reality. So we don't understand, we have this thing in our human realities where we don't understand why we don't feel the joy and the peace and the freedom we want to feel. But yet when we start switching over to soul aligned realities, we start to get that feeling, but we'll have a lot less. You'll find you don't have, the more you clear programming, the more you get rid of a lot of clutter, the more you cut ties and sever cords of attachment with things, you just don't have the things weighing you down anymore. And that's when you really get that sense of freedom. A sports car is not gonna, it might trigger a feeling of freedom, because if you don't trigger the feeling, and that's what everyone's trying to do when they go through that midlife crisis, is what a human calls it. I would call it more pre-awakening crisis. You're kind of in that pre-awakening. Really, awakening's not a crisis, but it will feel that way to the human, where you don't know what you're supposed to do. And you just start reaching for stuff. And you start reaching for all this stuff to feel that hole, because you're starting to feel how gaping the holes are. And how they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and how you can't fill him anymore with this stuff, no matter how big stuff you try to fill him with. No matter how big the house is, no matter how many cars are, no matter how many vacations you take, you can't fill the holes anymore. And it just gets harder and harder and harder, and it feels like everything starts to collapse on top of you, because it is such a demoralizing, in a sense, of all the stuff you worked for to get to this place, and you're still not there yet. And you just keep reaching out for something else. But some of these realities that we try to glom onto, they do give you a sense of freedom. They do activate freedom, that freedom code. A lot of people talk about freedom codes. You see them a lot. It activates that freedom inside of you. Even if it's just for a moment, you kind of have that feeling, but that's fleeting, because you have so many other things that are keeping you from feeling that. They keep us so compressed, and we can't feel that freedom for long periods of time. So we go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, until we kind of implode everything, because none of it's really working anyway. So we kind of scrap it all, scrap the paper, and throw it in the waste basket. We start again. And that's kind of what happens. Really, it's exactly what happens when you go through your awakening and ascension, which are two different processes. And when you start going through your awakening and then you get into your ascension, you kind of start with a blank piece of paper. You'll be surprised how many reality, most of our human, and that's one reason why we have to go through so many things we kind of don't want to do when we're in our soul aligned realities, because we can't walk and embody in our higher consciousness and higher selves if we still have a lot of human shit going on. If we have a lot of that human shit going on with our parents, with our exes, with our children, with our jobs, whatever our programming is, the bigger ones, the ones that after a while you kind of don't want to touch, because you were like, I don't really want to go there. I don't want to have to deal with my mom. I don't want to have to deal with my ex-husband. I don't want to have to deal with my ex-girlfriend or my ex-wife. I don't want to have to go back into any of this old stuff. Sometimes you get forced back into that old stuff, and it might seem misaligned because it's not what your human wants to do, but it's aligned for your soul to go there, because we cannot live higher line realities and be, what people call it, light beings. You'll see it called, your higher selves. You can't live as that divine consciousness and that divine being when we solve all the human shit inside. We can't do it. It's not possible. If there's anything that's going to cause you to go back into a human consciousness, whether it's story, whether it's victimhood, whether it's whatever, you're going to be forced back into these realities to clear that stuff. Because if you can't hold your consciousness and be that, I'm going to stick with light being. It's usually not a word I use. I'm going to stick with that today. You can't live in that consciousness and be that shine that bright, be in those higher dimensional frequencies, embody those higher dimensional frequencies. We still have all that shit going on underneath that we don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about any of that stuff. It's all that stuff we don't want to go through. So when you have to start going through that, we feel like we made a misstep. How is this a soul out in reality when there's nothing I would have chosen to ever do from a human consciousness? And that's why it is, because we have to clear that stuff out of the way. Sometimes you might have to deal with people that are getting ready to exit. They're getting ready to exit this, this consciousness, this realm. And you're just going to be there to prepare them for that. And that might not have been something you wanted to do. That might not have been something you would see yourself doing, but you're supposed to be there to do that. Because one of the reasons why you see all these prolonged exiting for a lot of people, where they're ill for so long, because they're holding on so much to all the stuff that never got cleared, and it just doubles down, so they're trying to clear all that stuff at one time and pull away from their body, and it's just so much stuff that they can't get away from it in a sense. But when you will see other passings that are so easy because a lot of that stuff has been cleared, they've lightened that load. They've maybe started cleaning up their house. They've started doing all this stuff unconsciously to get ready to go. So it's not that prolonged. There's other reasons they do that, but this is one of them. But there's also other reasons that kind of go into this too. But why sometimes we're just preparing people to go. We're lightening the load for them. We might be helping them clear out their house. We might be, bringing in some higher consciousness stuff. We might be opening them up to some of that. So, they're easier to go. They're easier to go on, but that does not feel like a reality a lot of us want to experience. But there's a reason we're in that, and there's a reason that we're put in certain situations, and they're not the ones we thought we were going to be in. But if we don't clear all that stuff, if we don't provide those services, if we're not able to come from those places and do that type of stuff and be there for people in that kind of way, and work through all our stuff, then we can't truly walk and be higher consciousness. We can't be our higher consciousness aspects. It's not possible, because we have too much stuff going on underneath. So when you are working through some of these realities that feel that they're heavy, and especially when you kind of can feel everything, and you can just feel the trauma of humanity. You can feel the trauma of nature in a sense, and all of it gets to you, and I was going through a period where nothing really got to me. I went through a period where I couldn't really watch anything violent at all, and a lot of us will go through that kind of in the beginning, and it's part of our awakening too, and sometimes the beginning of ascension, because you see how much that stuff affects your field. And until you get to a certain place through ascension, then you kind of, that stuff can come back in again, and it doesn't bother you as much. You don't have that. You go, especially for me, after I went through a lot of my galactic embodiments, I could detach from a lot of that stuff, and it didn't bother me. It just didn't bother me. But lately, I've gotten to where some of that stuff bothers me again. I saw a cat the other day that had it looked like he lost his ear, and I saw him in the backyard, and it just tore me to pieces inside, and that stuff had gotten to where it didn't really get to me. And so I'm going on a different part of my process where I'm feeling a lot more of that stuff again, but we have to feel that stuff. We have to feel all that stuff that, makes us feel that way, because it's clearing all that sadness from the body too, and it's clearing all that energy in a sense, so we can move on to the next level and move on to the next thing. But we're going to be called to do a lot of stuff that won't feel like it was part of our plan. But once you're in it and you start to understand why, as much as we don't understand why we're in it till we're way in it. And I started this by saying at the beginning of, I was talking about 2024 when we hit kind of the summer solstice. And especially when we hit the fall equinox, we were talking about, okay, we're starting to really anchor in a lot of the stuff for 2024. But you're going to be different, multiple layers of stuff you're doing in 2024. I might be concentrating on a couple things for a couple Q&As I want to do, or a couple things a course or two I want to put out, and that's one thing. And then there's going to be other relationships I have that I know they're moving into a different phase, and I'm going to play a different role than I played last year in other people's lives. And so you're going to have multiple roles you're going to be playing out. It won't just be one, but you will notice a shift in all of them. I've never had a same, and we're just going to keep it on linear year now, even though, like I said, this stuff comes in way before the linear year starts. We just start anchoring it in around, kind of toward the end of the year, beginning of the next year. You'll find that your roles are never the same. They change every year. Where you might have been learning to live in unity consciousness with people the year before, the next year you might be helping them get ready to go on, whether they're leaving through death, or they're just going to move away, or whatever. They're going to go into another part of their life, and that the next year might be you just preparing yourself for that and them for that. And then the next year they might depart and move and go somewhere else. So and it also lessens the load of what we have that keeps us anchored in certain realities. And that's another reason why people go, when they go, because a lot of this stuff keeps us in realities that have played out, and there's no more purpose to playing it out. It's now time for all of us to go into the next thing, and we can't go into the next thing. We're so heavily rooted in the old thing. So when you are in the process of just exploring the question, do I feel free inside? Do I feel freer inside than I felt the year before? That's more of a gauge on how we're doing in Ascension. Not to judge how we're doing, but just to get an idea. Yeah, I do feel freer than I did. I don't feel as bogged down. What am I afraid of happening? Kind of go through that scenario. Well, what is going to bring me fear that's going to knock me off of feeling my freedom? Have I completely pulled out of all the human realities? Do I still feel that intimidation from human realities as far as what can happen once we get outside of them? Because once we start living outside of them, kind of off the grid in a sense, our own version of off the grid, there's a lot of stuff that can feel heavy and heavy and heavy. And until we clear the fear and the intimidation factor of really human realities, we can still not feel free and away from them. And that's why it is important for the collectives to go to a certain point, because if the collectives don't get to a certain point, we can't continue to go. Even though I might have gone through something on a micro level, I'll find myself going through it again. I won't normally have as much energy attached to it because I've cleared my personal stuff around it, but we're also clearing on a multidimensional level too. It's not just, one thing. That's why awakening can feel so hard, because we get a lot of our karmic pushback during those years of awakening, where everything we've ever done in this dimension and in every other multidimensional reality we've lived in, everything we've ever done that was a karmically created a karmic cycle to come back and hit us, it kind of starts to hit us all at one time. It's like boom, 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 boom. We just can't get off the ropes. We just keep getting hit again and again and again and again and again to kind of work through all of that, to go on to the next phase. So I'm going to open up my chat. I think I've kind of gotten to a good energetic in there. I don't really have anything else I don't think I'm going to bring in today. I wanted to keep this one kind of a little bit shorter. But I think that does kind of put a little bit of, I don't really want to say structure, but I guess that's what I'm going to say. It puts a little bit of structure around when we start looking at our realities. Look at what makes us feel free, looks at what doesn't. And why do we keep that? Why do we not feel free with this in our life? Why do we not feel free with this relationship? It doesn't always mean the relationship has to go. Our attachment to it has to go. And that's what gets a lot of people kind of confused in a sense, because we get to this point where we're so afraid everything has to go, and it's not so much the thing. The thing doesn't matter. The person, in a sense, doesn't matter in that sense. They're just something we're using to attach to. You know, it's the attachment to the person, to the thing, to the job, to the money, whatever it is that keeps us to almost guarantee we have to lose it, because we can't be attached to it. We can utilize stuff to activate us, but we can't have the attachment to it. The attachment is what eventually will sever the reality, because it will have to be severed to go on to the next one. It's kind of like the fates, you know, when they cut the string of life and certain things. And in a way, that's what we're doing. We kind of become our own fates, and we cut the strings on certain realities, and we end them. You know, we end our attachment to them. It doesn't mean the reality has to go, but our attachment to the reality having to be there, to the reality causing us to have any emotion either way, in a sense. Like, it's great if it's there, but if it's not there, I'm still going to feel free inside. I'm still going to feel peaceful inside. I'm still going to feel joyful, whether that's there or not. If it's there, that's just a bonus. You know, it's a bonus if that's there. It's not going to dictate how I feel. It just doesn't have that kind of power, because when we give anything that kind of power, we depower ourselves. You know, we power ourselves down to give something else that kind of power. And that's why it has to get removed if we still continue to do that. Now, I will say, before a lot of this stuff gets removed, we will have a lot of chances to let it go. Speaking from a girl who had a lot of chances to let certain realities go or restructure them, and I just did not listen, and I just kept thinking, oh, never mind, it's fine, I don't need to do that, I don't need to do that, I don't need to do that. That when it got there, when it got to the kind of when the shit hit the fan on these realities and they kind of caved down around me, I'm kind of sitting here like, oh, what happened? Well, I didn't get it in order. And I had the opportunity. I had multiple opportunities. And I watch people all the time, multiple opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to align something. And they just won't do it, because they don't want to go through the change. They don't want to go through the restructuring of their life to do it, when it would be way easier for us to do that than to wait for it to crash. But as a human, we like to just put on the crash helmet and wait for it to crash. That's just how we are. In our human consciousness, that's who we are. We don't want to do the shifts. So that's why a lot of them will crash. But the only ones that are going to crash are the ones that you have that attachment to. The other ones will end, but because you don't have the attachment to them, you really don't care. And a lot of times, I did a video, I don't know when it was. I think it was a couple years ago. It might have been last year. About there's some endings we don't even know they ended. They were the endings we missed. They were the kind of that misconnection thing they used to have on Craigslist, where people would, you know, get in there and before, you know, I guess before we had a lot, I don't remember even when it was, but I remember people talking about misconnections. It's kind of like the things we didn't even realize they ended. They're like, did that end? Oh yeah, I guess it did. But because I didn't have an attachment to it, I didn't have an identity around it, I didn't even realize it ended. You know, it just ended and went away. I didn't even notice. I didn't even notice it was gone. And in a way, that's how we get to a lot of different things, because when you finally start restructuring and you get into the higher line realities, you also don't attach to them. You know, they're there, they're fine, you enjoy them, you know, and when I say they're fine, you don't have the highs and lows either. You know, you just kind of live in a frequency that's brighter and lighter, and you don't attach to the stuff anymore, because you also know it's all going to be kind of fleeting anyway. Your role's going to eventually shift and change. They're not going to stay the same, and that's kind of the beauty of our realities in general. So they have that flip and mimic the human realities, but we don't dread the change. You know, I remember always talking to human consciousness, people in their human consciousness saying, oh, I love change. I love change. Change is the best thing in the world. Little change is fine with people. You might even get the mavericks that are into the big change, like moving across country on a whim or whatever. When you're changing what you identify with and how you've structured your reality, those are big mega changes humans do not want to do. Okay? I didn't want to do them. No one I've ever talked to that's going through this process has ever wanted to do them. Those are the big shifts. It's not the human maverick kind of shifts. I mean, you're into a whole different Merlin shit when you get into ascension of the stuff you're going to have to do. It's not just little stuff. It's not just where you live, it's how you structure your life and how you live your life. And what realities you choose to live in and what realities you choose not to live in. It is a totally different beast than, thinking in our human consciousness, because we don't mind change, that it makes us more freer inside. It's you're still tied to the same stuff. It's more of the illusion. It's the illusion of freedom, in a sense, that humans will try to create. It's the illusion, because I don't mind change, I'm free. You're really not free. You have that illusion of freedom because the stuff that really matters to you is not getting messed with. When the stuff that matters to you in your human consciousness, what you identify with, starts getting messed with, you feel a whole different way about that. So, okay, I think we will end today on that note, and I will see everyone, I think next week.